I hope you've had a good session so far. I'm myself intrigued by the passion and energy we've seen in this room before this panel, and I'm sure we will keep up the passion with our distinguished speakers here, and I'll try to put them in spot, but I'll also try to make sure that I give you all time to ask these specialists the questions that you deserve to get answers to. So without further ado, I think let me start from you, sir, on the fact that you've run some amazing programs on energy efficiency in India. And I think as we look at how our NDCs have been designed where, we want to become net zero, but we also want to make sure that we become net zero more effectively, efficiently, and through thought out programs. And you, sir, have run a very thoughtful program, the whole transformation to LEDs that we see today in India, which has actually revolutionized the way lighting sector is seen. And I would definitely want to know what were the thought processes, when you were designing that particular program. And not just that, I think you've worked on a number of different kinds of schemes, which also includes the star labeling scheme, for example. So what was the thought process behind all of this, and how easy or difficult was it, really to run those programs? Over to you.
Thank you, Manpreet. And first of all, let me thank Times Network for inviting me here. The journey for India's energy efficiency actually began in 2001 when the Energy Conservation Act was enacted. And if you read the objectives of the Act, it says very clearly that energy efficiency doesn't need to be heavily regulated. And the reason is there is an inherent business model. So if you invest in energy efficiency, you save on costs. And therefore, the idea was, while we create through the Bureau of Energy Efficiency a robust policy and a regulatory framework. You mentioned about the star labeling program, then the perform, achieve and trade, the building codes and so on and so forth. These were the only 3 regulatory aspects that were delivered. Then the government also realized that you need to have a market maker. And that's where the first national mission for energy efficiency was born in 2009 and 10, which eventually led to creation of EESL. Idea was that how can we make energy efficiency simple for everyone, you and me, people on the ground. And that's how we decided to pick up LED bulbs, because that connects everyone, that impacts everyone. And if you are able to create a business model, which we were able to, where it was the customers who started demanding LEDs vis-a-vis any other form of lights. And that's what we saw in a short period of 2-3 years. We saw a complete market transformation. And by the way, lighting accounts for about 20% of India's energy consumption, if you see. So the whole idea is that there is an inherent business model. Yes, it is not easy because the barriers are unlike renewable energy, where you put up a wind farm or a solar farm and you put a meter. There is no issue. I'm generating X megawatt and I get paid for X megawatt. But energy efficiency has to be derived. And the second part is the asset is not with me. The asset is in someone else's premises. Now, how many hours that person uses is not something that you can control. Now, if you want to be very, very intrusive, that increases the cost. So there's a very fine balance as to how do you, and this has been a market barrier, not just in India, everywhere. So I think that's the whole philosophy. Make it simple, understandable, draw in a lot of people into this.
No, absolutely. And I think, I've been, for example, in this space for the last 21-ish years, and, working on carbon and energy efficiency in particular. We always find that there are benefits. There are benefits for cost reduction. There are challenges or risks at times in terms of higher capital costs associated with some of these initiatives, which is what has been the barrier. But I think, there are many ways in which those barriers have been alleviated in the recent past through the right policy directions, right sort of financing that has been made available. We've seen dedicated credit lines now available for, financing energy efficiency programs. So there is a definitive advantage of becoming more and more energy efficient. And I think the National Mission on Energy Efficiency in particular actually focuses on, doing that. And Mohit, you have been at the helm of I would say powering our country for several years. And NTPC as an organization, of course, while it had started with being a thermal, associated with thermal and fossil fuels, but I think you've led the teams which have actually helped, NTPC diversify into becoming, an organization which not just focuses on producing power from fossil, but is focusing on becoming an energy major in general, which focuses on diversified ways in which we can meet our energy needs. So what has been your experience on how the transition really happened, with NTPC now deciding to look at portfolios of diversification into renewables and clean energy? And how has energy efficiency played a role, as well in doing that?
Good evening and thanks Times Network for having me here. You talked about NTPC. Yes, NTPC's pivot from thermal to renewables. Partly you can relate to carbon efficiency also, because when we say that we are reducing the carbon footprint of NTPC, one of the simplest and, as Saurabh said, the most simple way of doing it was to diversify your portfolio, which was start bringing into the grid more renewables, zero carbon, so that overall carbon imprint of NTPC per megawatt or per unit basis goes down significantly. So that, and of course a strategy to keep growing, because everyone at NTPC also realized that coal is something which will have an end date. May not be now, maybe 5 years down the line, but that is something we need to look at, and we need to create a portfolio which helps NTPC sustain its growth trajectory. So with that perspective, we had actually moved forward, and of course I'm happy to share, and probably a lot of you are now shareholders with NTPC Green NGL, which was listed December last year. And I hope it set a benchmark in terms of how green can help you do better. Green can help you make money also. I mean, as a shareholder, I don't know who all are here, but definitely it can make you help money. And that is something which will help in the overall basis. Because if you are looking at becoming more carbon efficient, from that angle, definitely yes, renewable becomes one of the most go-to strategy to follow. But I do agree, and probably I can add to the energy efficiency piece. Saurabh was the head of ESL, and NTPC was one of the promoters. So to that extent, energy efficiency is something which has been one of the themes which NTPC has looked at. And I can probably also add here that over the years, like when BE came out with the Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme, which was also largely based on improving the efficiency of your existing systems, NTPC was a participant on the power side. So all these things have been key for NTPC to grow and become more efficient.
Right. No, absolutely, sir. And I think everyone in this room, you're all worried about climate change, right? And I think decarbonization is not just a terminology. I think when we talk about decarbonization, we are talking about it in the context of reducing emissions. And reducing emissions makes sense. And that's what we've seen through the years, that companies which have been on the mode of decarbonizing their energy use, decarbonizing, in general, the way they produce or manufacture products. And today we are working with some of the marquee organizations as well, trying to figure out, what really is the meaning of net zero, right? I've heard everyone talk about net zero. My previous speaker, being so young and talking net zero or making sense of net zero to, the rural communities, how far that would be successful, I don't know, because in boardrooms we are still discussing what does net zero mean. Any company which has taken up a target of even 2030, 2035 is still trying to figure out what net zero would mean for them. Many have committed. Our country has committed. There are several other countries which have, committed so far as well. And, the session is also about how carbon efficiencies can help us move to a net zero future. But I would say that, again, while decarbonization makes sense, net zero is still a terminology which is not yet clear to many. And moving to a state in the future where we are going to neutralize any emissions that, we are doing today and also at that time, I think it's going to be a transformation that, we would see, not just in terms of, technology upgradation or innovation, but also behavior change. And I think we've spoken my previous speakers have spoken too much about those behavior changes. But even in context of energy efficiency, sir, the behavior change, is an important component. And how far were you successful in building those components into the schemes that you ran? Of course, shifting to energy efficient appliances, tower appliances, there was success, in doing many of those. But I'm sure there was always a question of cost versus efficiency. And, so far, the higher the star rating, the costlier the appliances were as well. So what were the, I would say, policies or influences that you built in your programs to enable that larger behavior change as well?
Okay, before I answer that question, let me mention that energy efficiency is a resource that has been not given the kind of attention that it deserves. In fact, if you look at the entire world, possibly India has given this much more attention than anything else. And I'll give you an example. Renewable energy has two intergovernmental bodies, IRENA and ISA. So many other things. You don't have a intergovernmental body dealing with energy efficiency. And that's something which is quite surprising. But I would say India has been kind of a leader in energy efficiency. Yes, behavioral nudges are extremely important. You can do this largely by sharing data. The more persistent you are sharing data, telling people, making them aware of what is the life cycle cost of a energy efficient equipment vis-a-vis anything else that they are using. That is where I think BE has done a lot of good work. They did for the star labeling program. What we are now trying to do is something which goes beyond that, and we are going to start a pilot in BRPL here, the BSCS Rajdhani, is to create a kind of a real-time chatbot and a real-time information, and we want to figure out by non-intrusive means using data, AI, and ML to figure out in a household what is the levels of efficiency of the equipment that are used, and these technologies have now emerged, and provide the customers the comparative use. For example, in my house, as compared to Mohitji's house, the utility can tell me that, look, your bill is much higher than the monthly bill of Mohitji because he uses a much higher efficiency AC. So these things, when you provide this peer-to-peer information, very targeted, globally, if you see, this is how you have been able to nudge people towards energy efficiency. And I think time now has come for India to do this. And the driver for this, and I mentioned about the national mission that was there in 2009-10. I think there's a time for a new mission for energy efficiency to come in. More so because in G20 in 2023, India led the call for doubling energy efficiency by 2030. Today, our rate of growth of energy efficiency is about 2.5%. Now, you have to really up the ante to reach about 5%. And by the way, 2.5% is among the highest in the world. That's why I continue to say India is at the forefront. And most importantly, the first mission that I spoke about was largely focused on the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and EESL. I think what is needed now is go down to the states. That is where the real action is. Provide the kind of support and guidance to the states to really ramp up and scale up energy efficiency, including the demand side management and behavioral nudges.
No, well said, sir. And I think moving from central to state level is definitely something that we feel as well is required. And somehow while ESL had its own successes that it's seen, the state at the state level, I don't see many examples there. But Mohitji, I'll come back to you. And I mean, while you were transitioning to newer technologies, while you were assessing what are the areas that NTPC should move into when it comes to green, so how far do you see, there is access to clean technology that, you could get, for example, in India, in terms of availability of technology, in terms of commercial availability of certain technologies that you would have wanted to forte into? And I know that NTPC has piloted, the carbon capture utilization kind of technologies as well. You have looked at, solar, wind. You have ran, hydro projects as well. So from your perspective, how far do you see, it was easy or difficult for you to access technology? And if you want to add, the perspective of financing on that as well, I think that would be great.
So I think technology was never much of a challenge. But of course, we need to understand that many new technologies are available, may not be in India, but in due course they have. If you take, for example, the case of solar modules, largely they have been built, the current lot has been built on imports, and a small percentage is coming from a domestically manufactured market. But government did come in with a PLI, which was the idea was that more and more solar modules should be manufactured in India. So from that perspective, and now they're looking at battery, for example. In terms of technology per se, whether for thermal power plants or a renewable, if I may use the word revolution, because the way India's renewable capacity has grown over the last 10 years has been phenomenal. And I think everyone has contributed, whether it's the central government, the state government, the private sector, the public sector, the financing institutions. Because ultimately the money did come in. So when you talk about finance for efficiency or finance for decarbonization, I think that's never been a challenge per se. That's our point of view. Because any good sustainable project will get financed. It's not as if you go to the market or to any lender and if you offer them a project which has very clear viability built in, the banks or the lenders are very happy to pitch in. Of course, at that point of time, I was representing NTPC, so it was never a challenge to get money because we always had a lot of people willing to lend. But if you look at technology, and probably I like to maybe move a bit towards the efficiency side. So, and this is the work being done by ICC, which I'm advising right now. So one of the examples they're focusing on is improving the efficiency of the air conditioners, for example. And I think a lot of work in that was also done by ESL, because when you said star labeling, so ESL also, I think he's more famous for LEDs, but ESL also at various points of time have offered air conditioners, 5-star air conditioners. So, just for the information of the people in this room, the efficiency standards, while 5-star is good, and I think a lot of us feel very happy buying a 5-star air conditioning, maybe paying another 5,000 rupees, because maybe we can afford it. But if you look at where we are globally, so just as a point of reference, India's 5-star is actually 1-star in China. So that is the difference in efficiency, and that is the technological point. But what we did find in the research was also that India does still import a lot of compressors and all these things, because India's demand is huge. So if we have to, for example, shift from today's standard to a standard which is globally prevalent, that's not too much of a problem, because that will very easily move on. So people have to start importing higher efficiency product as compared to what they're importing now. So from that standpoint, there is a technological challenge, and government is trying to help people. They have given guidelines to the manufacturers how they can move forward. As expected, there's a lot of pushback, because any manufacturer is quite happy doing what they're doing now and making the money what they're trying to do. But if you try to sell a 5-star India-made AC in China, you can't sell. So if you're looking at moving the needle, and I'm saying moving the needle significantly, let's not make it incremental. Because if we are not able to move the efficiency needle on air conditioner, we are looking at potentially an increase of 180 gigawatts of additional demand on the grid in the next 10 years. And close to about 60-70 gigawatts in the next 5 years. So efficiency becomes very important, and the role played by ESL and other agencies. So it's not just a question of nudging the people, it's probably also ensuring that their payout as a customer. If you tell people today to go buy an air conditioner which is 2x in terms of price, but it is also 1.5x more efficient, maybe they'll go, maybe they'll not go. Some very conscientious people who have been sitting on this stage and who are talking all climate, maybe they'll all buy. How many in the room will do, I really don't know. So we have to ensure that whatever options are offered, they're also monetarily equally good for them, either on long-term basis, and that is where I think a lot of good work was done by ESL as well as the government in terms of communicating. But that communication has to keep on happening. So if we tell people that you move to LED, I think, you can correct me, sir, I think what, 10 million or was it a billion number of LEDs sold? 380 million. So that's the kind of number which was sold. So a lot of work, it was not just, saying that we are selling, it was also communicating. Replace this, you will save so much. Replace this, you will save so much. And of course, the larger factor was also the affordability. They brought down the price of LED from whatever it was to down by 80%. So these are the things which will matter. So technology per se is something which you start with today, import, and then start manufacturing. So.
Yeah, no, I think very well said, sir. And I think to a question on the market mechanism, as you've run a market mechanism yourself domestically, sir, India is a party to the Paris Agreement. We have taken up a target under the Paris Agreement as well. We had, a lot of success in the Kyoto regime on becoming a net seller of carbon credits. And I think India has now announced its own domestic carbon trading scheme as well, which is going to potentially replace the PAT scheme in the future. And we've also had, our clarity that we brought in terms of what India wants as technology, which is what Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement outlines. So we have identified a list of 13 technologies that we would like to access to and therefore provide, tradable mitigation outcomes from those. But my question to you, sir, is as we design the India carbon market, there are obviously lessons from the PAT scheme. And potentially these industrial units which are now given a target to become carbon efficient were the same because these were earlier given the target of, becoming more energy efficient. So what's your one message to, the stakeholders, who are, and I think we are one of the stakeholders, we are helping design the India carbon market. So what would be that one learning or lesson that you would give for the India carbon market to become successful in the future?
Honestly, I don't know much because I've not put my head into what is being designed. The one thing that I will say should not be done is a repeat of the PAT scheme. What has happened in the PAT scheme, if you see, it was all designed that e-certs will trade in the market. The cost of e-cert is 1 ton of oil equivalent now, which is almost 10,000 rupees for a certificate. It was being sold at 25 rupees. So I think the kind of demand setting, how the target setting has to be slightly more aggressive. Otherwise, what will happen is you will have a glut of what is called CCTS, and you will not have a demand. So I think this is the major lesson that needs to be learned from the PAT scheme. Number two, I think there is a need to further diversify the pool of players. Just 600 odd entities doing trading amongst themselves may not necessarily drive the kind of market that we see in EU ETS or California or Japan or Korea. So I think these two things I would say, as I said, I'm not part of anything. I hope this is being designed properly because if we miss this chance, I think we will possibly, not just on energy efficiency, but also clean energy, there will be a setback to the country for a while.
Right. No, thank you very much for that, sir. And I think we have just 1.5 minutes left. So, I would like to give a chance to the audience if any of you has questions to any of our speakers here. If not, then I have a last question to Mohit. Yes, sir, please. Is there a mic we can give? You can just speak of it, sir. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah. In last first term of President Trump, he quit the protocol of this Paris Agreement. And again, he is not joining. He says a fake. So how we convince President Trump to be again in part of this climate change? And now recently, Bill Gates has come down to a proposal to have 90 kilometers on the earth. So he says he will cut down the temperature. Do you think it's going to happen?
So on the first question, I don't think even Mr. Trump knows the answer. So it is very difficult to speculate anything else. But I think the world will continue. We see this as a 4-year blip. People will come and go. But last time also he walked out of the Paris Agreement. But after he came back, so hopefully it's only 3 more years to go.
Right, with that, I think we'll close this session.
Yeah,
I'm sure you will get a chance to speak to
Bill
us.
Gates of Chalk 90-kilometer layer. He's doing whether it will be effective.
So we'll take this offline. I mean, because the time is over, so we'll take this outside if you want.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'll give it back to you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for that wonderful discussion. I'd like to request Amita, my co-host, to present to all the panelists and our moderator with a token of our appreciation. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Another round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, ladies